All right, continuing on with my series on Deleuze, reading from Dialogues. I'm going to read quickly, it's only a couple pages. The preface to the English language edition gives, I think it's short and sweet. It's from 1986. This is from Gilles Deleuze himself. Please, again, subscribe if you want to continue hearing from these readings. I've always felt that I am an empiricist, that is, a pluralist. But what does this equivalency between empiricism and pluralism mean? It derives from the two characteristics by which Whitehead defined empiricism. The abstract does not explain, but must itself be explained, and the aim is not to rediscover the eternal or the universal, but to find the conditions under which something new is produced. Creativeness. In so-called rationalist philosophies, the abstract is given the task of explaining, and it is the abstract that is realized in the concrete. One starts with abstractions such as the one, the whole, the subject, and one looks for the process by which they are embodied in a world which they make conform to their requirements. This process can be knowledge, virtue, history. Even if it means undergoing a terrible crisis each time that one sees rational unity or totality turning into their opposites, or the subject generating monstrosities. Empiricism starts with a completely different evaluation, analyzing the states of things in such a way that non-pre-existent concepts can be extracted from them. States of things are neither unities nor totalities, but multiplicities. It is not just that there are several states of things, each one of which would be yet another, nor that each state of things is itself multiple, which would simply be to indicate its resistance to unification. The essential thing, from the point of view of empiricism, is the noun multiplicity, which designates a set of lines or dimensions which are irreducible to one another. Every thing is made up in this way. Of course, a multiplicity includes focuses of unification, centers of totalization, points of subjectification, but as factors which can prevent its growth and stop its lines. These factors are in the multiplicity to which they belong and not the reverse. In a multiplicity, what counts are not the terms or the elements, but what there is between a set of relations which are not separable from each other. Every multiplicity grows from the middle, like the blade of grass or the rhizome. We constantly oppose the rhizome to the tree, like two conceptions and even two very different ways of thinking. A line does not go from one point to another, but passes between the points, ceaselessly bifurcating and diverging, like one of Pollock's lines. To extract the concepts which correspond to a multiplicity is to trace the lines of which it is made up, to determine the nature of these lines, to see how they become entangled, connect, bifurcate, avoid or fail to avoid the foci. These lines are true becomings, which are distinct not only from unities, but from the history in which they are developed. Multiplicities are made up of becomings without history, and of individuation without subject, the way in which a river, a climate, an event, a day, an hour of the day is individualized. But it has a completely different use and completely different nature. It is a being multiple instead of a being one, a being whole or being as subject. Empiricism is fundamentally linked to a logic of multiplicities, of which relations are only one aspect. This book, first published in France in 1977, aims to highlight the existence and action of multiplicities in different domains, very different domains. One day, Freud sensed that the psychopath experiences and thinks multiplicities. The skin is a collection of pores, the slipper, a field of stitches, the bone is extracted from an ossuary. But he constantly fell back on the calmer version of a neurotic unconscious which plays the eternal abstractions, and even Melanie Klein's partial objects still refer to a unity, even if it is lost to a totality, even if it is to come to a subject, even if it is split. It is very difficult to reach a thought of the multiple as such, which has become noun, and which does not need to refer to anything other than itself. The indefinite article as particle, the proper name as individuation without subject, the verb in the infinitive as pure becoming. A Hans becoming horse. It seemed to us that the great project of English and American literature was to get close to such multiplicities. It is in this literature that the question, what is to write, has undoubtedly received the answer which is closest to life itself, to vegetable and animal life. It also seemed to us that the highest objective of science, mathematics and physics, is multiplicity, and that both set theory and the theory of spaces are still in their infancy. It seemed to us that politics is at stake as well, and in that a social field rhizome spread out everywhere under the arborescent apparatuses. This book is made up of such a collection of musings on the formations of the unconscious, on literary, scientific, and political formations. This book itself was between in several senses. It was written between two books, The Anti-Oedipus, which Guattari and I finished, and A Thousand Plateaus, which we had begun and which was our most ambitious, most immoderate, and worst received work. This book happened, therefore, not merely between two books, but between Felix Guattari and me. And as I wrote it with Claire Parnett, this was a new point which made possible a new line between. What mattered was not the points. Felix, Claire, Parnett, me, and many others who functioned simply as temporary, transitory, and evanescent points of subjectivation. But the collection of bifurcating, divergent, and muddled lines which constituted this book as a multiplicity and which passed between the points, carrying them along without ever going from one to the other. Hence, the first plan for a conversation between two people in which one asked questions and the other replied no longer had any value. The divisions had to rest on the growing dimensions of the multiplicity, according to becomings which are unattributable to individuals since they could not be immersed in it without changing it qualitatively. As we become less sure what came from one, what came from the other, or even from someone else, we would become clearer about what it is to write. These are lines which would respond to each other like the subterranean shoots of a rhizome, as opposed to the unity of the tree and its binary logic. This really was a book without subject, without beginning or end, but not without middle, corresponding to Miller's phrase, quote, "The grass grows between. It is an overflowing, a lesson in morality." That is the end. Again, that was from 1986. Thanks for listening.